Hi everybody, it's Mr. Stewart here with an assignment video for the wave assignment, the wave animation assignment, part 1. And so we're going to treat this very similar to the way we did the bouncing ball. Part 1 is going to be more about the rough animation, not worrying about getting into the final cleanup or making it look finished, but really concentrating more on the movement and the motion. And a lot of the different tools that we used before, we're going to use a lot of those same tools. And we might branch out a little bit in level 1 into some other things, but really what we've gone over is going to be a good foundation to get used to learning how to animate. There's two different parts to this. One is the software part, which we're going to try to make it as kind of get it as much out of the way as possible so we can really concentrate on the animation part, which is about movement and emotion, performance, physics, understanding all of those aspects, because those are going to be the foundation for any kind of animation that you do, whether it's Toon Boom or Maya or stop motion. So the assignment is to have a character wave 4 times. Now, last time we did a background. I'm not going to do one on purpose, just to show a potential pitfall that could happen in the way that you export out the video. But we'll get to that in a minute. So I'm going to shift over to my brush, and I'll keep things on black. And I'm just going to create a character here that's going to be waving, and just make this really simple. And give myself a little quick drawing. Of my my character. And I'm going to kind of start off here on frame 1 with my character just having its his arms on his hips, and you can see everything's pretty rough. Now, there's a level of roughness that works pretty well, and then there's a level of roughness that's going to cause you some issues in the future. Just doing something super rough isn't always the greatest idea if you are going to clean up your work later. You want to be able to define the shapes and the forms. That doesn't mean they need to have a super clean line, but you can see that I'm going back in here and I'm making sure I understand where the shapes are going to end up. So you can see this elbow is pretty rough. Now, pretty easy to say I would just kind of go back over the top like this. But sometimes that's worth doing even in the rough stage. Everybody has a little bit different feel to it, a little bit different preference, but you want to make sure that if I go back and clean up, and even better, if somebody else goes back and is cleaning up my work, then they're going to know where to put the cleanup lines and where to clean everything up. So I'm going to go through and do a what we call a pose-to-pose approach. Now, this is, we're going to go over this. This is one of the principles of animation. We're going to go over this in a week in class to really understand the two major different approaches: straight ahead animation and pose-to-pose. But I'm going to start off in pose-to-pose. And what that means is I'm going to skip ahead. I'm not just going to go through and go from one frame to the next. I'm going to skip ahead and want to see where the major poses are. I can move those around, I can shift those around, and I can go back and add in-betweens in those once I've got those major poses where I want them. So the first thing I want to do is do an anticipation. And I'm just going to do a quick sort of squash, having this character close his eyes. And kind of squash just a little bit in the body. Maybe have the shoulders kind of come up a bit. Now again, I can keep things pretty rough. Just want to make sure they are clear. And probably just do a little bit of movement on this hand here. And now you can see I've got my first little anticipation. Now I think I want to get a little bit bigger anticipation. I like the movement of the head, but I'm not sure if I like the movement of the body and the arms. And this is one of the great things about Toon Boom is I can go in, select this, and on this frame, I want to make sure I'm on that frame. I can actually kind of adjust some things here. And now I get a bit bigger. I think I want even bigger. And move this here. So I think this is working a little bit better. Now, I could just go back in and erase some pieces and just kind of go in like this. And let me scroll back just a little bit. And I could add that in. I could take, using the direct select, actually it's probably going to work better like that. And I can kind of move this around. Now, this is not that much different than if I was doing hand-drawn animation, but it does give me some digital options. Meaning, if I was doing hand-drawn animation, I'd usually just put another sheet of paper over the drawing, do another drawing, kind of make adjustments, and that was a pretty normal part of working in with paper and pencil. But I've got the anticipation a little bit better, I think, working the way that I like it, and now I'm going to start doing my major poses on the wave. And let's have this. And I'm just going to pull that back so I can see. Let's have my character sort of come up here. Big smile. Let's see how that's working. And I'm going to have my character's arm big. Now, if it goes a little bit out of frame, I'm not going to worry too much about that just yet, because I can always put in a peg on the overall and shrink it or move it around. That's something I can adjust, what we call globally, later on. But let me sort of draw out the other arm. And then I'm going to make this kind of a fast wave. And as I have my character wave in one direction, I'm going to have the body push in the other direction a little bit. The reason I'm doing this is as it's sort of a counterbalance. When one hand moves in, the arm moves in the other direction, I'm going to lean to counter the balance of my arm out in open space. So, as my arm moves this way, my body moves this way. And that's helpful to remember because we want to get a little bit of movement in these other pieces of the body. Other poses, I'm just going to make some drawings here. Now, one thing I want to be clear and not clear, but I want to start thinking about, this is one of the reasons we work in a rough form. If I look at the volume and the size of this first drawing, this is usually the drawing that I want to sort of measure everything against. You can see that my head is getting a little small. And I want to make sure that that is staying consistent. So I can either, just kind of rough it out again, like this, and that feels a little bit better. Or I could have scaled it up. There's a few things I can do, but I just want to make sure that I am thinking about that as I'm even working out these sort of major poses. Now, a lot of times people will ask, well, what is a major pose and how do I find that? What do I do? Now, with the wave, you can see that it's a little bit easier to find because the wave is going to have two sort of end points, the beginning and end of the wave on either side. But still, it can be a little bit challenging to identify those. There's no perfect way necessarily, and a lot of times, things that I think are going to be major poses, I end up adjusting them later. So you can always go back and change things around. You can see here, as I'm looking at this head, I'm seeing that it's kind of shrinking too. So this might be an easier thing to say, okay, well, let me go in there. Let's see. Do it this way. Let me go in there and scale that up just a bit. We'll do the same thing here. just so that I can make sure I'm getting a consistent, I might even want to scale this one up a little bit here. Get that consistent in there. So it's just something I'm thinking about. Now the assignment is to wave 4 times, so that's 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to do at least one more. I might even, decide that I want to do. More than that. But for the sake of time here, I think we can make this somewhat simple. So again, this idea, I want things to be rough, but I want them to be clear. And what I mean by rough is I want them to be, I don't want a drawing to ever get to the point where I can't quickly go in and grab a piece and scale it up and change it for the benefit of my overall animation, where I can always go back in. I tend to be drawing this just a little small. I can always go back in and change those the sizes, whether I'm drawing them or not, or if I'm editing that by using the scale tool, or cutting a piece and copying and pasting. No matter what it is, I want to be able to have the freedom to make changes, because the reality in animation is I'm not going to get it right usually on the first try, and because of that, I want to give myself the ability to be able to edit quickly. Now, it's kind of fun to be able to look at all of my drawings and see if they're all sort of working together. Sometimes that can be really helpful because we are wanting to think of all of our drawings as a unified pattern or collection of images. And now I'm going to, let's see, that's right. Okay, so I'm going to grab all of these, and I'm going to right click, go to exposure, and fill empty cells. Now I am going to turn off my onion skin here, and I'm just going to shorten the whole animation here. Now this is really only 2 waves. If I think about it, there's one big push up, then one down, then one. So I would probably do a couple of more. Really, for most assignments, I recommend doing about 3 to 5 seconds, which is somewhere around 75 to 150, 150 frames, somewhere in there. That's, I guess, more like 6 seconds. So, but again, for the sake of time, I'm going to keep this kind of short. But I would say for you, you could keep adding in more waves, more entertainment, adding in more ideas to the animation. All right. So now, what I mean by changing around the timing, I kind of like that it's pretty quick. But for the sake of changing things around, I could go in here, click on this frame, and I could increase the exposure or decrease, which we've talked a little bit about the plus sign and the minus sign. If I want to add in another frame, I can do that, or I can hit the plus key. I can hit the plus key here. And you're not seeing anything happen. Well, that's because I need to increase this. This will give me a little bit of quick movement in the middle, but then it'll slow down towards the end. And I can change things around if I want this to last a little bit longer at the beginning. Sometimes that's nice to give about half a second, which is 12 frames of the character just being on screen. That'll help the audience when they begin to watch. They'll sort of catch up. So I think there's little things I can do like that. And that's one of the benefits of working in pose to pose, is that I'm working kind of like an outline. I'm working in a way that is very easy to make edits to adjust. Just like I want to be rough in my drawings, I also want to be rough or loose in an editable way with my overall timing and the animation, how I've put everything together. So now I can go back in and begin to do the in-betweens. Now this is this becomes a little bit messier, if you will, to do in Harmony than it does in maybe another different animation app that you've used, or Harmony, if you're working with a peg or a rig, this would be a little bit cleaner. But what I'm going to do is now sort of go back and say, I'm going to take away I'm going to clear the exposure. Now I don't want to use the pull. I'm just going to use the clear exposure, and it is. It looks like it's only doing it on the frame that I am currently on. So that can be a little bit of a slow process if I'm going to have to go and clear every single exposure here. The thing about decreasing exposure, I could do that, but you can see that if I use the minus key, it's pulling everything. It's pulling everything back. In which case now I'm going to have to grab all of these, and I can just sort of shift them back to where they were, and get myself back to a position where I didn't have all the exposure in there, because I want to keep this sort of in the clear as I'm in-betweening. So as I said, there's pros and cons to both. I could also go in the middle here and go to exposure and then insert a blank cell. This is going to push everything forward, but now this shows up on either side of that blank cell. I can go over here and just delete this, and that's sort of an easy way to do that, is to just delete those as well. And I think that's probably the easiest way to go back, is just to shift select those keys and hit delete. I want you to be aware of all of the different ways you can manipulate these different exposures and drawings, and get yourself so that you can see things clearly, but be able to go back and forth to a place where you're going to be able to in between. So now I can go back, I can turn back on my onion skins, and I can begin to in between in a quick way. Now I'm going to work on twos, which is meaning for me, I want to make sure that if I'm on a frame, and you can see the frame number that I'm on, it shows up right here. I'm on frame 13, I'm on 22, 27, 31, and 38. Now, this is okay if I'm going to work on ones, but if I'm going to work on twos, I want to shift that over so that that's on an odd number, so that all of the different frames that I'm working with are going to be on odd numbers. Well, that's shifting around. I'm just going to click this over here. Now, it's giving me the exposure again. And let's see if that'll work. Pull this over. Okay. Well, it takes a little, and that's what I mean. It's a little bit awkward in terms of how we work with the interface, because it's really designed to do things in a lot of different ways. And this is not the cleanest workflow, but I do think it's worthwhile to learn sort of the traditional approach. Now, I can go in between. Now, the quickest way to in between is to go right in the middle and put a drawing right in the middle. But this isn't really how we move, and we're going to talk about a lot of these different principles and the way that we create patterns. So if I created a pattern of drawings that had a drawing in the middle, in the middle, in the middle, and if you think of this sort of line as frame 1, and this line as frame 13, and I just kept kind of figuring all of those different things out by putting frame 7 right here, and then just kind of going through all of those, doing 3, 5, and then I'd probably do it this way where, maybe I could just do a third like this. But I make everything super even, and we don't move in even patterns. That's really why I'm saying all this, is I want to make sure we understand that we don't want to move in an even pattern. We don't want to create an even pattern. We want to create, we're going to talk about all of these different principles, but I want to create a pattern that is going to accelerate. And that is going to look something more like this. And then it's going to maybe decelerate. That pattern of drawings I can do in a different way, where I'm going to create a really quick drawing like this, that is really a lot closer to my first drawing. It's a little bit different. But it is what we call favoring the first drawing, which means it's closer to that. And then I'm going to do the same thing here, and now I'm going to still kind of favor the first drawing. And this is where, I want to keep things very loose, very rough, but I also don't want to get caught up in having to make things be perfect. They can be very, very loose. Now, I also want to be aware of kind of the key drawings, the ones that I put down originally, my key drawings. Now, like I said, I might change those later, but it's good for me to be aware of where they are. So I might make a notation. I'm just going to create a sort of a circle in the corner for all of these key drawings, like this. And if I take this off, you can see I start to get this movement. Now I could go back in and continue to in between, and I'm always going to kind of favor that first drawing position. And even to the point where I might be tracing, almost feeling like I'm tracing back. Now this is going to create, when I press play, a kind of a jiggly line. That's pretty normal. It throws people off because once the cleanup process is done and we see a finished piece of animation on TV or in the theaters, well, then we're going to, in many cases, hold on, let me see if I can get this. There we go. Then we're going to see a much smoother line because we're going to see a cleaned up drawing. But in rough animation, that jiggly line, that living line, is very normal, and you shouldn't feel like you're doing anything wrong if your animation is jiggly like that. Now, especially if your shapes feel consistent. If your shapes are moving from this size to this shape, well, then it's going to look a little odd. But if you're moving from here to here to here to here, well, that's going to feel consistent in the way that your shapes are. And that is a good thing. But you're still going to get some jiggliness in the movement of the line, which is okay. Okay, so let me keep in betweening all of these here. And come back in here. I'm going to delete that little section so I can get eyes beginning to close, head beginning to squash a bit, body moves. Now, if all of this becomes really frustrating because pose to pose, you're not sure how this is working, how do in-betweens work, how do I see the drawings? I've spent a lot of time practicing being able to see what the drawing is in between, and that's easier for me to do. If all of that is difficult, then you just want to go back to what we call straight ahead, which is you just go from one frame to the next frame to the next frame. That's perfectly fine. You're more than allowed to work that way. I'm just trying to introduce all of these different ideas and concepts. And I like the anticipation here. I want this anticipation to stay kind of down in this area for a little while. So I might even just do a drawing that is, almost virtually the same, like this. And just going to even take that off there. And what this does is it allows my character to have a bit of a pause in his movement. Now, I was, when I first started animating, I really, this really threw me off to kind of do basically the same drawing over again for a few frames. I always felt like I needed to have everything moving. And and that's not really the case. I don't really need that. So here, let's see this, and sometimes that onion skinning gets a little tricky. All right, I think you might be able to hear my rooster out there. And this, you get into the real grunt work, the tedious work of animating. Animating is a whole lot easier to watch and takes a whole lot less time to watch than it does to actually create. The animation process can be very, very slow. So I'm going to take a moment to save my animation. I'll go over here, save, make sure that everything is saved and I have everything the way that I want it. And now I can go in and I can still add in some drawings on ones if I want to. And I think for this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to create some really big squash and stretch drawings. Just kind of have some fun here. The other thing, I think when I first started off, I always felt like if I didn't get it in the right spot on the first try, then I must be doing something wrong, and that's not really true. Animators move stuff around all the time. Just keep drawing in all of these ideas. Kind of really stretch this out here. Can even add in maybe an extra finger. Or 2, or 3, or 4. Now, I've kind of run out of frames, but I still feel like I should put in some in-betweens in there. So this is one of those things where I can say, okay, I'm going to move this over a bit. I wish it didn't always automatically fill everything out when I did that, but I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to delete this. And now I'm going to keep adding in on ones, since I'm going to odd numbers here again. Let me add in one more. And add in my hand. Now I'm going to have it back to a regular hand again. And then now I can go on to 2s again. I'm going to move this over once more. And I can kind of skip that. Draw in that hand. Now, from this point on, I'm kind of doing the same thing over and over again, is just in between finishing out all the drawings. This takes, you know, a fair amount more time than just drawing a ball when we did the bouncing ball. And so I'm going to turn the recording off here in a second and kind of finish out the animation, and then we'll come back once it is finished or close to finished, and I can give you a little bit more insight on, you know, then turning it in. And, you know, don't be afraid to kind of have some fun with the animation. You know, really, squash and stretch can be a great friend as long as you are aware, okay, I can only do this for so long. I don't want my volume to change for more than 2 or 3 frames, but you can see here I'm making this much bigger hand. Now, since it's only going to be on screen for 1 frame, it is going to be just fine to do that, to make it really big, and that'll help sort of blend it from one spot to the next. Come in, and you can see this can get really difficult. As the animator, I have the best view of what's going on, but even I can get pretty confused about which drawing goes where. But remember, red is where I'm coming from, green is where I'm going to. And if sometimes all I can see is just the drawing before and the drawing after, then as long as I put something in the middle, it may not be perfect, and it may be something I need to adjust later on, but it is going to be in order, which is important. Okay, so let me do one more. I'm going to do a lot on 1s here in this wave. Now, when I first started animating, I would get so frustrated if it didn't turn out the way that I had anticipated or hoped for even. And let me take a moment to just sort of talk through how hard animation really is. It is not easy to do this. Animation takes a lot of practice, and a lot of what I'm doing, has taken me. I've been doing this for over 30 years, which is a long time, and so if yours if you can't quite get your animation to look like on the screen the way that you thought it was going to look in your head, don't be too discouraged. That is a normal part of the learning process. And hopefully you're enjoying the learning process. It is a ton of fun, I think, to learn to animate, especially if you can give yourself some slack. Cut yourself some slack in making your animation look this perfect way, or even comparing it to other students or other films, projects. The comparison is, for me, that was a big part. I wanted to see other people's work, and I wanted to compare myself to them, and I think that is helpful if it's helping us to learn how to improve, where I can improve, what kinds of things I can improve on. Oops, put in the mouth there. But if I start to get discouraged by that comparison because I don't feel like mine is good enough, well, that's not always that helpful, quite frankly. And we want to be aware that that comparison can be kind of harmful sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to keep plugging away here. One of the things that I do when I'm in-betweening is I try to look at individual pieces. So if I was going to look at the finger, I don't look at the whole hand as a shape. I only look at the finger and I say, okay, here's the green finger, middle or last finger. Here's the red, and I can put it in between. Then I find the middle finger and the middle finger, I put it in between. Then I find the green finger and the green finger, I put it in between. And I just sort of build the entire structure piece by piece, because if I'm looking at the whole thing, well, then it gets very, very difficult. So I'll look at the shape of the head and say, okay, this is where I want, and I'll look at the where the eyes are individually, then I'll look at the eyebrow. Okay, and oops, I want to do one more thing. I want to fill in these exposure, fill empty cells. So this works pretty well. It gives us a little bit of movement, a lot of energy, and you can see that those lines are kind of jiggling around, and that's okay. It feels like I have my my animation and my for the most part, I have my sizes, my volumes, all about the same. So now that I am at this point again, I'm going to go to save my file. That's always something I want to do over and over again. Okay, so now I'm going to show you, we're going to export out a video again. Go to File, Export, Movie. I've got my QuickTime movie. I want to find the right location to create my wave and animation part 1, and I'm going to put in here test like this, and when I hit save and I want all of my frames, I hit OK, and what you're going to see now is that when I open my animation here, let me get this ready to bring over, you will see that I have nothing but black on my screen, and it seems like I've done something wrong, or that Toon Boom has broken, maybe QuickTime, and this can be very frustrating. In actuality, my animation is there. But since I did not create a background layer, by default, when it makes the movie, it puts in a black background. So I need to either put in a background, or if I just want to have a gray background or a white background, I can go over here to plus, and I can add in a color card. Now you'll see the color card now has this sort of grayed out boxes. And I'm going to make sure that the color card is underneath my layer so it doesn't cover it up. And if I double click on this color card, right where the little symbol is, you can see this long color bar. That is the color that I can pick. If I want to do a gray, I could do kind of a grayish blue. I could grab one of these, and that seems like it'll work pretty well. And just click that, close this, and now when I go to export my movie, well, first off, anytime I make a change like that, I want to save again. Now I go to export my movie, and this time I'm going to change it and put in part 1 version 1, hit OK, export this out, and now you'll see when I can get this ready to go and bring this over here. Now I have my animation that feels very clear and everything's easy to see. And those black or those sort of grayed out boxes don't show up. Those are just to let you know that that is a color card that's happening there. All right, so this is what you would turn in for part 1. And then next week we'll go over, again, some other techniques on how to do a more finished version. So remember, save your file onto your computer and turn in your video, and have a great week.